All right, welcome back everyone to the deep dive. We've been spending some time with the Forged Act, all these interesting recommendations. And today we're going to take a really close look at one specific section, Section 102, Defense Acquisition Modifications.
Yeah, this is a fascinating one, right? I mean, it gets into the nuts and bolts of how the DoD buys things, trying to update that process for, well, I guess for the modern world.
Right, so Section 102, it's part of S 5618, which, if you remember, was introduced back in December of 24. And it basically targets these existing kind of rules, the acquisition requirements found in Titles 10 and 40 of the U.S. Code.
Yeah, you got it. The whole goal is to kind of grease the wheels a little bit, make defense acquisition a smoother, more efficient process. The idea being to cut down on some of those those bureaucratic burdens that people talk about. And we've got a really good example of that in our source material, 10 U.S.C. 3705. That one specifically aims to reduce how much information is needed for pricing. When you don't absolutely need all that certified cost and pricing data.
Right. So less paperwork in certain situations.
Yeah.
But does that create other risks? We'll get to that, I'm sure. But first, this push for efficiency, it's not new, is it? This isn't like some radical departure. We've got decades of reform efforts behind us.
Not at all. It's a constant evolution, right? You look back even to the 2009 Weapons Systems Acquisition Reform Act. That was all about streamlining things. And in fact, our sources point to some interesting GAO reports. Like there's one, GAO 25-107003, and it highlights these lingering inefficiencies, even after we had the 2020 Adaptive Acquisition Framework come into play, which was supposed to make things more flexible.
Right. So the quest for a better way continues. And of course, we can't forget about Senator Wicker's big push, right? Restoring Freedom's Forge, American Innovation Unleashed. That whole initiative was about cutting red tape, right? Fostering innovation. And Section 102, well, it seemed to be a direct result of that thinking.
It's all connected. Absolutely. So where do we go from here? With this deep dive, we need to break this down, right? Figure out what these changes in Section 102 are really all about. What are they trying to achieve? Where are the potential pitfalls? And most importantly, for our listeners, how do we get ready for this? How do we actually implement these modifications? And of course, a big part of that is going to be understanding those mitigations outlined in our sources.
Exactly. So let's start with the good stuff. What's the upside here? What are the intended outcomes? What's the best case scenario if all of this works out the way they're hoping?
Well, they're aiming high. Less paperwork, that's a given. Less administrative burden, that's what they're calling it. By simplifying those pricing requirements in specific situations, it should theoretically make things easier. Less hassle for government agencies, less hassle for contractors. Everybody wins.
So less upfront work potentially, but does that mean more problems, down the road? Is there a risk we're just trading one headache for another?
That's always a concern, right? Change can be tricky. But that's exactly why they've built in those mitigations, which we'll talk about later. But theoretically, yeah, less admin work should speed things up. And that leads to the second big goal, faster acquisition cycles. If you're spending less time gathering information, you can award contracts quicker. And that means you can deploy what you need faster, whatever those capabilities are.
Faster deployment. That's got to be huge for everybody involved, right?
Yeah.
What else are they hoping to see?
Well, efficiency, of course. Isn't that always the goal? Streamline the process, cut down on overhead costs for both the DoD and for contractors. And that frees up resources, right, to do other things, the things that matter.
So less money wasted, things moving faster. Sounds like a classic win-win if they can pull it off.
And there's another interesting angle here, more competition. Because if you're lowering the bar for entry, right, less paperwork, simpler requirements, you're potentially opening the door to more contractors, including smaller, more innovative companies. And competition is good, right? It drives down prices, encourages new ideas.
Yeah, we've all heard stories about those smaller companies struggling to break into the defense market. So this could be a real game changer.
It could. It could shake things up in a good way. And the last thing I'll mention, alignment with the 21st century, right? They want to make defense acquisition more agile, more responsive, more in line with how modern businesses operate. Because let's face it, the world moves pretty fast these days, and the DoD needs to be able to keep up.
So it's all about becoming leaner and meaner, right? But there's always another side to the coin, isn't there? What about the potential downsides? What are the things that could go wrong?
You got to be realistic. Change is hard. And there are always risks, like, for example, transparency. That's a big one. If you're requiring less information up front, well, it could become harder to track what's going on. Make sure prices are fair. Hold people accountable.
Okay, yeah. Less data could mean less oversight. wouldn't those alternative reporting mechanisms we keep talking about take care of that? Or is there still a risk there?
They're designed to address that, absolutely. But it's a shift, right? Moving away from all that upfront data, it means relying more on things like random audits, spot checks. It's a more targeted approach. So there's inherently a bit more risk.
Okay, so transparency is one concern. What else?
Well, pricing accuracy. If you don't have all the data up front, there's a chance you might get it wrong. You might overpay or even underpay. And neither of those is a good look, right? Especially when you're dealing with taxpayer dollars.
Yeah, that's a pretty big deal. Any other potential roadblocks we should be thinking about?
Resistance to change. It's a classic. You've got folks who are comfortable with how things are done now. They've been doing it this way for years, and they don't want to rock the boat. So, there might be some pushback. And that can slow things down, make implementation more difficult.
Yeah, you can definitely see that happening. People digging in their heels.
And then there's compliance. If the new rules aren't crystal clear, people are going to get confused. Contractors, DoD personnel, they're all going to be trying to figure out, well, what did these changes actually mean? How do we apply them? And that could lead to inconsistencies, even legal issues. So clear guidance is absolutely essential.
Makes sense. You can't just throw out a bunch of new rules and expect everyone to get it right away.
Right. And then last but not least, there's always the potential for abuse. Anytime you loosen restrictions, there's a chance someone might try to take advantage. Now, the goal here isn't to weaken oversight, and those mitigations are supposed to prevent that. But it's a risk that you always have to consider.
Right. So we've talked about the good, the bad, the potentially ugly.
Yeah.
Now let's get practical. We need to help our listeners understand those mitigations. These are proactive steps, right? Designed to address those potential negative impacts. So walk us through them. How do these things work, and what should our listeners be doing to prepare?
All right, let's dive in. First up, alternative reporting mechanisms. So instead of requiring all that detailed information up front every single time, they're shifting to a more, I guess you could say, a more flexible approach, using things like random audits, spot checks. It's about focusing on the areas that might be higher risk, rather than trying to catch every little thing.
Okay, so less paperwork to start.
Yeah.
But maybe a higher chance of a more in-depth review down the line. What does that mean for folks in the audit world?
It means they need to be ready for anything. These audits might be less predictable, more targeted. So you got to be prepared to provide the information when they ask for it. And for contractors, it means good record keeping is more important than ever. Even if you're not submitting a massive report up front, you got to have your ducks in a row, just in case.
All right, so stay organized. Got it. What's the next mitigation we need to be thinking about?
This one's crucial. Guidance and training. It's pretty obvious, right? If you're going to make big changes, you got to tell people what those changes are and how to deal with them. Specifically, the sources are talking about training for contracting officers, making sure they're up to speed on the new pricing methods. Because if they don't understand it, well, the whole thing falls apart.
Yeah, that makes sense. So if you're out there and you're involved in contracting, what should you be doing right now to get ready for this?
Don't wait for someone to tell you. Stay informed. Keep an eye out for any announcements from the DoD. New guidance documents, training materials, all that. Because you need to be ready when these changes take effect. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Get involved in industry forums. The more you understand, the better prepared you'll be.
So be proactive. Don't just sit back and wait. Good advice. What's next on our list?
Phased implementation. This is all about taking it slow, rolling things out gradually. Maybe start with low-risk contracts or specific agencies. That way, you can work out the kinks before you go all in.
So a more measured approach. Does that mean we're going to see different parts of the defense world adopting these changes at different times?
Exactly. It might be a bit of a patchwork for a while. Some areas might jump on board quickly. Others might take a wait-and-see approach. So if you're listening, pay attention to what's happening in your corner of the defense world, because it might be a while before these changes affect you directly.
Okay, so stay tuned. Keep your ear to the ground. Makes sense. What else do we have?
Stakeholder engagement. This one's all about communication, talking to the people who are going to be affected by these changes, both on the government side and the industry side. The idea is to get everyone on board, address any concerns, and basically work together to make sure this thing is a success.
So for folks in the defense industry, this is an opportunity, right? To actually have a say in how these changes are implemented.
Absolutely. This is where those industry associations, individual companies, they can really make their voices heard, provide feedback, work with the DoD to smooth out any rough edges. It's a chance to be part of the solution.
And lastly, what's the final mitigation we need to cover?
Monitoring and evaluation. It's all about measuring success. You got to figure out if these changes are actually working. Are they achieving what they set out to do? So the idea is to establish clear metrics, track things over time, and make adjustments as needed. And our sources even reference DoD Directive 5000.01, which is like, the Bible for managing these acquisition programs. So it's all about continuous improvement.
So it's not a one-and-done deal. They're going to be watching this closely, making tweaks along the way. Now, let's talk about who's actually going to be affected by this. Who are the folks who need to be paying the most attention to Section 102?
Well, contracting officers, for sure. They're the ones who are going to be dealing with the new pricing methods day in and day out. But it's not just them. Program managers are going to be affected. Legal advisors, auditors, anyone involved in the acquisition process needs to be aware of these changes.
And we talked earlier about potential resistance. Who are the folks who might be pushing back against these changes?
You've got a few different groups to consider. Some of the big defense contractors, maybe they're happy with the status quo. It's been working for them, so why change? Then you've got the oversight folks, the GAO. They might be worried about losing some transparency. Congressional committees, they always want to know what's going on, so they might push back if they feel like they're getting less information. And then you've got the industry associations. They might be concerned about how these changes will affect their members. So, yeah, there are definitely potential roadblocks. Understanding those different perspectives is important.
It helps to know where the pushback might come from. Now, let's talk about resources. What's it going to take to actually implement this successfully? And how will we know if it's working?
Well, you need a few things. First, training. You got to get those acquisition personnel up to speed. Then you need updated policies, clear, consistent guidance from the top down. And you might even need some new IT systems to handle the changes, make things more efficient. And of course, legal support is always important to make sure everyone's playing by the rules.
So it's not just about changing the rules. It's about changing the whole infrastructure. And how do we measure success? What are we looking for?
There are a few key indicators. First, are contracts getting awarded faster? That's a sign that things are more efficient. Second, are we spending less on administrative costs? If so, that means we're saving money. Third, are more contractors bidding on projects, especially those smaller, more innovative companies? That would be a good sign. And finally, are people happy? Are contractors and government personnel satisfied with the new system? Those are all things we need to be looking at.
So a lot of moving parts and a lot of ways to measure success. Now, before we wrap up, our sources mentioned some alternative approaches, other ways to achieve the same goals. What were some of those ideas?
Yeah, there were a few things they considered, like pilot programs, testing the waters before going all in, more detailed guidance with the specific examples to help people understand the new rules. They even talked about using technology like data analytics to improve pricing accuracy and closer collaboration with industry, working together to find the best solutions.
Interesting. So there's no one-size-fits-all answer. It's all about finding the right mix of strategies.
Exactly. And that's what makes this whole thing so complex.
All right, so let's sum up. Section 102 of the Forged Act. It's all about making defense acquisition faster, more efficient. They're trying to streamline the process, cut down on red tape. But there are some challenges, right? Transparency, implementation, that's where those mitigations come in, the alternative reporting, the guidance, the phased implementation, all those things are designed to address those concerns.
And for our listeners, the message is clear. Pay attention. Stay informed. These changes are coming, and they're going to have a big impact on how the defense world operates. So do your homework, ask questions, and be ready to adapt.
And on that note, I'm going to leave you all with a question to ponder. Given how tricky defense acquisition reform can be, how might these mitigations actually make a difference? And what are the key signs you should be looking for to know if Section 102 is actually achieving its goals? Think about it.
This has been a great discussion, but remember, this is just one piece of the puzzle. There's a lot more to unpack in the Forged Act. So be sure to join us next time as we continue our deep dive into these recommendations.
Until when, thanks for listening. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.